I found out my sister got married through someone else's Instagram story. No invite, no call, nothing. Just a filtered photo of her in white, grinning, tagged at a venue I didn't even know existed. And before the sting could fade, she texted me, not to explain, not to apologise, but to ask for the keys to my lake cabin, for her honeymoon. The same cabin I built with my bare hands after surviving a divorce no one in my family cared about. That's when I realised something terrifying. Maybe I was never really part of the family. But what I did next changed everything. Christmas at my parents' house always felt like a performance. The lights were warm, the table perfectly set, the wine generously poured, and everyone smiled just a little too widely. Laughter echoed through the candlelit dining room, artificial and hollow, bouncing off walls that had absorbed more silence than love. I sat between my father and Aunt Jo, watching Emily at the other end of the table, glowing in her sequined dress, as if the night had been orchestrated just for her. Dinner was fine, too fine, no arguments, no mistakes, almost suspiciously smooth. The kind of evening that made you question if the dysfunction had ever really existed, or if it was all in your head. But then came the gifts. Mum handed out the presents like a benevolent queen. My name was called, and a box was placed in front of me, wrapped in silver paper with a gold ribbon. I peeled it open to find a set of handmade watercolour brushes. Top of the line, the exact ones Emily had pinned on her wish list a month ago. I looked up. Emily's eyes locked on mine, and then drifted quickly away. "Oh dear," Mum said with a forced giggle. "Those were supposed to be for Emily. Yours must still be in the trunk." She never went to get them. She never mentioned it again. That was the 5th time in as many years my gift had been mixed up. I smiled, of course. That's what I'd trained myself to do, but inside I shrank again. And I couldn't help but wonder, if I disappeared, would they notice before dessert? Later that night, I drove back to my cabin by the lake, the only place in the world that felt truly mine. I built it after my divorce. Every beam, every nail, every paint stroke was mine. It was small but solid, the kind of solitude that heals. No one from the family ever visited. They didn't approve of my lone wolf lifestyle, as Dad once put it. But now, I realised, they didn't disapprove enough to leave it alone. It started with a single sentence from Mom as she hugged me goodbye. "You know," she whispered, "Emily and her fiancé will need somewhere quiet for their honeymoon next year. Your cabin would be perfect." I stepped back, blinking. "Excuse me?" She smiled, tapping my cheek. "Just something to think about. Family helps family." I didn't reply. I couldn't. My throat had closed up in that particular way it does when someone slices your boundaries with a butter knife and calls it affection. A few days later, still stewing in discomfort, I opened Instagram while sipping coffee by the frozen lake. There it was, Emily, in a white dress, laughing, holding hands with some man in a fitted tux. The caption read, "Best day of my life." And she was tagged at a rustic vineyard 2 towns over. Dozens of comments. "Stunning! Finally, you two are perfect." I hadn't been invited, not even a call. Not a text. I stared at the screen until my coffee went cold. Scrolling through the photos felt like reading someone else's life, a stranger's. My sister's life? But a version where I didn't exist. I called Mom. She picked up after 3 rings. "Heather, everything okay?" "Emily got married," I said flatly. Pause. "Well, yes. And I wasn't invited, she exhaled dramatically. Sweetheart, she didn't want to make things awkward. You know how you can be. The two of you are different. I was silent. My hand started trembling. She didn't want any tension on her big day. You understand, right? No, I didn't. But I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. That evening, Emily called me. Hey, sis, she chirped like nothing had happened. Listen, I wanted to ask you a favour. I didn't say a word. She continued. My husband and I, God, that feels weird to say, we're planning our honeymoon next week, and your cabin is honestly the dream spot. You're not using it, right? I choked on my own breath. You're calling to ask for my cabin? Well, yeah, you're always alone there. I figured you'd want to do something else for a change. You didn't invite me to your wedding. That was complicated. No, I cut her off. And it's not complicated. You made a choice, and now you want something from me? She sighed, annoyed. Look, Jared doesn't really like your vibe. He said it'd be better if we kept things simple. My vibe, I repeated. It's not personal. You can be a little intense. Jared thinks it's... Never mind. Can we just use the cabin? I'll send over a cleaning service after. No, I said, ice in my voice. The line went dead. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept rewinding to Emily's voice, casual, entitled, calling my home a vacation rental. And Jared, the new brother-in-law I'd never met, branding me intense, as if I were a character in a story they were writing without my permission. I spent hours pacing the living room, staring at the walls I painted myself, feeling the chill seep through the floorboards. It wasn't just the call. It was everything that came before it, crashing down at once. The next morning, I tried to distract myself by cleaning out the closet in the guest room. That's when I found the old shoebox. Tucked beneath stacks of old notebooks and expired tax papers, it smelled of dust and regret. Inside were school pictures, birthday cards, and a single yellowed report card with my name, Heather Ann Morrison, grade 7, a C in math. I remembered that term. It was the same month the $20 bill went missing from Mum's purse. I had been accused, screamed at, called ungrateful and sneaky. I'd cried for hours behind my bedroom door. Emily, 10 at the time, said nothing. It wasn't until weeks later I saw her pulling the same crumpled bill from her jewellery box, using it to buy glitter pens and stickers at the school store. When I confronted her, she smiled and said, "What are you going to do? Tell Mum. She won't believe you." She was right. That memory should have felt like ancient history, but it resurfaced with such clarity it nearly knocked the breath out of me. The pattern had always been there. The golden child and the scapegoat. The one who could do no wrong and the one who could never do right. Later that afternoon, I visited my father's office in town. He owned a small insurance firm and had always kept a locked cabinet with personal files. When he stepped out to take a call, I wandered to his desk, pretending to admire a framed photo of our family from 2 decades ago. That's when I noticed a manila envelope labelled Last Will Draft. I shouldn't have opened it. I did. Inside, among other documents, was a highlighted line, "Property at Lakeside Parcel, year 47, to be inherited by Emily Morrison." My cabin, the one I bought, the one I paid for with years of savings and solitude. My name appeared nowhere in the inheritance. I shoved the papers back, my hands shaking. On my drive home, I pulled over twice to throw up. That night, Emily texted me again. Still mad? Jared thinks you're being childish. Cabin's practically mine anyway. Dad's will says so. You might as well get used to it. I didn't respond. The next day, I logged into our family group chat to find myself removed. The chat was renamed to Morrison Circle. I wasn't part of the circle anymore. A blank coldness spread through my chest, but it didn't numb me. It enraged me. I called my mother. She didn't answer. A few hours later, I bumped into Maggie, a childhood friend, while buying groceries. Her face shifted when she saw me. "Hey," she said hesitantly. "I ran into your mum last week." I waited. "She said you were struggling. Mental health stuff. That you've been unpredictable." Something inside me cracked. "Oh," Maggie added, "she also mentioned Emily's moving into the cabin after the honeymoon. Said it's already decided." My legs turned to water. I left the cart in the aisle and drove home without speaking. Back at the cabin, I dug into my email archives, desperate to understand how deep the betrayal went. I filtered for anything from Mum's lawyer back when she asked me to review some property tax stuff. I opened an email chain from 3 months ago and felt the floor tilt beneath me. Attached was a document labelled Guardianship Petition Heather Morrison, filed by my mother. It stated that I was mentally compromised, emotionally unstable, and unable to manage significant assets, like my cabin. Her plan was to obtain partial legal control and transfer property rights to Emily for safety and family consolidation. She had already requested a hearing date. I collapsed onto the couch, clutching the paper, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't neglect. This was war. A quiet, careful war they'd been waging for years, and I'd only just now seen the battlefield. And then I saw it, another file attached to the email chain. A calendar entry. June 5th, move-in day for Emily. Set up utilities, change locks. I hadn't agreed, I hadn't been told. They were planning to take everything, while smiling, while laughing over Christmas ham, while calling me family. I dropped the papers and wept until my body gave out. I installed the cameras on a Thursday morning, small, discreet, motion-activated, tucked behind the porch light, under the eaves, and one facing the back entrance near the woodshed. I told myself it was for peace of mind. In truth, I was expecting a violation. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was pattern recognition. 2 nights later, at 1:47 a.m, I got a motion alert. I was half asleep, groggy with dread. I pulled up the live feed and watched in real time as headlights cut through the trees and a silver SUV pulled into my driveway. Emily stepped out first, then Jared. They weren't sneaking so much as strolling, laughing, holding hands, dressed like they were running afraid a weekend rental. Jared used a key, not one I had ever given out. They entered my home. I watched as Emily flipped on lights, wandered into the kitchen, opened the fridge. Jared took off his jacket and laid it over the back of my reading chair. They moved like they belonged. "This will be perfect," Emily said, her voice clear in the audio feed, rustic but not gross. "Kind of small," Jared replied, "but hey, freeze free." My hand trembled as I paused the video. For a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I wasn't being erased, I was being replaced. I called the police, filed a report for unlawful entry. The dispatcher asked if there was visible damage or theft. "Not yet," I said, "but it's my home. They had no right." The next day, Mum called. You called the police on your sister, she shrieked. What is wrong with you? They broke in, I said. She had a key. You gave her one years ago. I changed the locks. That key shouldn't have worked. It's just a misunderstanding, Heather. You don't need to escalate this. I didn't answer. I was staring at my laptop, at a document I found buried in my cloud drive. It was a scanned PDF, something I hadn't noticed until it was too late. A temporary transfer of property access, bearing my name, my signature, except it wasn't mine. The handwriting was close, but not mine. The date was recent. The document had been notarized by someone I didn't recognize. My hands went cold. Emily had forged my signature. Or maybe Mom had. Maybe both. They had filed it, and it had been processed. I wasn't just being excluded, I was being legally dismantled. I called a law office the next morning, booked a consult. I showed the lawyer the camera, footage, the forged document, the guardianship petition I found in my email archive. You have a strong case, she said, but you need to act fast. I want to press charges, I said, my voice flat. Forgery, trespassing, harassment, all of it. For the first time in weeks, I felt something solid beneath my feet. Then came the storm. The Facebook post came from my mother. A 3-paragraph rant painting me as unstable, vindictive, and unwell. She said I was lashing out due to years of isolation and that Emily had always tried to include me. The comments were worse. She always seemed a little off. Poor Emily, she's so sweet. I heard Heather had a breakdown last year. Lies. People I hadn't spoken to in years shared the post. Aunts, cousins, even my father commented, "We love both our daughters, but one refuses to let go of old wounds." I turned off my phone, drew the curtains, let the cabin go dark. For 3 days I didn't eat. I barely moved. I stared at the fireplace, unable to light it. My body felt heavy with humiliation. I started drafting a sale listing for the cabin, thinking maybe it was time to disappear, change my name, move out west, start over. Then I checked Reddit. I had posted a vague, anonymous version of my story in a support forum the week before, desperate to scream into the void. I hadn't checked the replies, hadn't expected any that mattered. But buried halfway down the thread, one comment caught my eye. I was Heather once. Took me 5 years and a court case to get my life back. If you need legal advice, message me. You're not alone. I clicked the profile. The user was a verified attorney, specializing in family trauma and property abuse cases. I messaged her. 2 hours later, we were on the phone. Her voice was calm, warm, unshaken. She understood everything before I could even finish explaining. They've spent years grooming you to believe you're the unstable one, she said. But you're not. You're the threat because you're waking up. She offered to represent me pro bono. I said yes. The moment I stopped questioning my sanity was the moment I finally started breathing. It didn't happen in a dramatic wave. It came in fragments, newspaper clippings in my memory, old fights, holidays, the way Emily always took and I always gave. The way Mum would say, "Just let her have it, Heather. She's younger. She needs more support." Even when I was 15 and Emily was 13, even when it was my college fund and she had crashed the car. It wasn't an isolated wound, it was a system. I had been the scapegoat, she had been the golden child, and now I had proof. My lawyer and I built a case, but I wanted more than legal justice. I wanted truth, Not vengeance, not a social media war, truth. I wanted people to see what manipulation looked like when it wore pearls and smiled at Christmas dinner. So I wrote. The post was titled, "My sister didn't invite me to her wedding, but wants my life." It was raw, specific. I laid out years of erasure, the cabin break-in, the forged signature, the fake guardianship, the lies, the gaslighting. I didn't use names. I didn't need to. Anyone who knew would know. I ended it with one sentence. They didn't just steal my home, they tried to steal who I was. It exploded. Within 48 hours, the post had over 400,000 shares. Major accounts reposted it. Hashtags started trending. My inbox filled with strangers, thousands of them, sharing their own family betrayals, their own cabins, their own Emilys. For the first time in my life, I was not alone. Then came the blowback. Emily issued a statement on her influencer page, calling my post slanderous fiction. She said I was mentally unstable and jealous of her success. A day later, she filed a formal defamation suit. The media pounced, the same ones who had praised her wholesome image now circled like sharks. Commentators dissected the situation. Some defended her, but more were sceptical. The details in my post were too specific, too honest. Then, out of nowhere, I got an email. It was from Rachel. Rachel had been Emily's best friend since college, maid of honour. The one who posted that wedding photo I'd first seen. The subject line read, "You deserve the truth." Attached was a voice recording. I clicked play. Emily's voice, clear as day. "She's pathetic," she said, laughing. "She won't fight back. She never does. She'll crumble like always, and everyone will take my side." There was silence. Then Rachel's voice. "What if she doesn't this time, Emily? Please, she's barely functioning. I just need her out of the way for good. Once I have the cabin, she can move to whatever forest she came from." I stared at my screen, mouth dry. My hands didn't shake this time. They balled into fists. My lawyer listened to the recording and nearly gasped. "This ends the suit," she said. "And if you're ready, we can go public." I was. We sent the recording to 3 journalists, all of whom had reached out after my post. Within days, the story was everywhere. Headlines range from family feud turns legal to the quiet theft of a woman's life. Even a morning talk show picked it up. Emily's brand contracts were terminated, sponsors fled. Her social media turned into a battlefield. Once adoring followers now demanded accountability. The court ruled in my favour. The cabin was declared my sole legal property with no claim from any family member. The guardianship petition was exposed as fraudulent. Charges were filed against Emily and potentially my mother. Then, one morning, a letter arrived in my mailbox, handwritten. The return address, my father. I hesitated. It had weight, like all the years he never defended me. I turned it in my hands, then slowly sat down on the front steps of the cabin. I didn't open it. I stared out at the lake. The water shimmered under the sun, serene and still, indifferent to everything that had happened on its banks. Without another thought, I stood, walked to the fireplace, and fed the envelope into the flames. I watched it curl and blacken, paper folding in on itself, like memory dissolving into ash. Some things don't need to be read. Some apologies only come when there's nothing left to save. She showed up just after sunrise. No warning, no message, just the crunch of gravel under tyres and the screech of her car door slamming shut. I was on the porch with my morning tea, the lake still cloaked in mist behind me, when I heard the voice I hadn't expected to hear again, at least not like this. "Heather," she cried. "Heather, please." I didn't move at first. I stared into my mug like it had the power to erase her presence. But the voice kept rising, higher, more frantic. "Please, open the door. I have nowhere else to go." I stood and walked to the door, not to let her in, but to see her, really see her. Emily stood there, her hair unwashed, face puffy, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. Her coat hung crooked off one shoulder, and her hands were trembling. She looked nothing like the polished golden child the world had adored online. She looked human, raw, and for the first time, small. "I'm ruined," she said, half sobbing. "They dropped me. Every brand, every sponsor. Jared left. He said I'm too much. I'm being sued, Heather. I don't have money for lawyers. Mom and Dad won't even speak to me. It's all gone. It's all your fault." I opened the door just a crack. Not enough for her to see inside, only enough for my voice to reach her. "No," I said quietly. "It's not my fault." She blinked at me as if she hadn't expected resistance even now. "The fault is thinking I'm still the girl you could manipulate, that I'd keep quiet, that I'd hand you my life again and again and just smile while you picked it clean." "I didn't mean—" "You meant every bit of it," I interrupted. "The forged documents, the fake petition, the lies, the press statements, the wedding I didn't know about. You meant it because you thought I wouldn't fight back." She started to cry harder, shoulders shaking. "Please, Heather, I've lost everything." "I've lost too," I said. "For years. You just didn't see it because you never had to look." I could have yelled, could have called the police again, could have dragged her for every ounce of betrayal, but I didn't, because real power doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to stand firm. I closed the door. She didn't knock again. Just sat on the front step for an hour, sobbing. Then she got in her car and drove away. The story didn't end there. Support poured in from across the internet. Messages from strangers, survivors, even a few relatives who had quietly watched everything unfold. A woman from my dad's side sent flowers with a card that read, "We see you now." Emily deleted all her accounts within the week. Her influencer page vanished. No more perfectly filtered brunches. No more matching couple selfies. Just silence. And in that silence, I finally heard myself think. Mum took longer to crumble. Her initial reaction had been rage. She posted on Facebook again, this time directly. "My daughter Heather is dead to me. She betrayed this family. She will never be welcome again." People used to nod along when she spoke, but now her words rang hollow. The neighbourhood whispered. Former friends of hers stopped responding to her texts. The social groups she clung to with such pride began to exclude her, not with confrontation, but indifference. And then came the real rupture. Dad left her. After 39 years of marriage, he moved out quietly one morning and filed for legal separation. No dramatic announcements, just a note on the fridge. "I can't lie for you anymore." It didn't make him a hero, but it made him honest, for once. I heard all of this through the grapevine. I didn't ask for updates. They found their way to me anyway. That's how these stories always do. They ripple. One night, sitting by the fireplace, I reread an old message from someone who had commented on my post. "Your story saved my sanity." I thought I was the only one. And then came the email. Subject line, Netflix Original Inquiry. At first, I thought it was spam, but the sender was legit, a producer who had worked on multiple docuseries. They wanted to adapt my story, my voice, my perspective. They weren't interested in dramatization or sensationalism. They wanted truth, just as I had wanted from the beginning. I sat there staring at the screen, the cursor blinking. I could still feel the weight of everything, years of being ignored, overwritten, gaslit into silence. But now the weight didn't drag me down, it steadied me. I clicked open the full proposal, read through it, every line. Then I stood, walked outside to the porch again, the same spot where Emily had cried weeks before. The lake shimmered under the moonlight this time, still and silver. I whispered to the night as if the water might answer, "I'm ready." The cabin was never meant to hold more than me. It had been my refuge, my cocoon, 4 walls, a fireplace, a desk, and a view. It was where I had gone to disappear, to mourn, to rebuild. But after everything, it had become something else entirely. 2 years later, it was alive in a new way. There were voices in the kitchen, soft laughter, the smell of tea and wood smoke. People, women mostly, though sometimes men, sat in circles in the living room or walked the lakeside trail in quiet pairs. They weren't tourists, they weren't clients, they were survivors. I had turned the cabin into a retreat centre, built not for healing, but for remembering. Remembering who we were before the gaslighting, before the silence, before the betrayal wrapped in a hug and called family. We named it the Turning Room, a place where stories turned into strength. There were no therapists, no gurus, just people who had lived it. People who knew the script by heart, the golden child, the scapegoat, the silent parent. Here, we unlearned it together. My book, The Scapegoat's Fire, released exactly a year after the Netflix documentary aired. I had written it at the same desk where I once drafted emails no one answered. I poured every chapter with brutal honesty, not just about what was done to me, but what I allowed, what I didn't see, what I had to forgive in myself. It hit number 1 on Amazon in 3 categories within a week. Publishers called, podcasts begged for interviews, bookstores invited me for readings. But the part that mattered most were the letters, hundreds of them, sometimes handwritten, from readers who said, "You told my story. You gave me language for something I thought I imagined. You saved me. I kept every single one." I was reading one such letter, a card from a woman in her 60s who had just cut ties with her narcissistic mother, when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in years. Emily. The message was short. "I'm sorry. I know I don't deserve a response. I just wanted you to know I've been in therapy. I'm learning how much I hurt you. I don't expect anything, but I wanted to say it. I stared at the screen, not in anger, not in pain, in stillness. I didn't reply, not because I wanted to punish her, not because I hadn't healed, but because healing had taken me somewhere she could no longer follow." I smiled to myself and locked the phone. Not responding was my response. Some bridges don't burn out of rage, some simply collapse under the weight of truth. That summer we hosted our first public workshop. The flyer was plain white with black text. "You're not crazy, they just trained you to think so." We didn't promise breakthroughs. We didn't preach. We just told the truth, and the truth spoken in a room full of people who had survived it had a kind of power that echoed off the walls like music. Each story cracked something open a woman who'd been cut off from her inheritance for choosing to go no contact, a man whose siblings erased him from family photos after he came out, a teacher whose mother still told people she had no children worth mentioning. No one interrupted, no one gave advice. We bore witness, and in doing so, we gave each other permission to be real. During breaks, we walked by the lake or sat in the circle garden we had built behind the cabin. One woman ran her fingers along the smooth wooden porch rail and said, "You can feel it. This place has been through something, but it didn't break." Neither did I. At night, I'd sit by the fire pit alone, watching embers rise into the stars. The quiet no longer scared me. It held me. One evening, as the last workshop of the season ended and guests packed their cars, I stayed behind to clean up. The floor creaked in familiar ways beneath my feet. The windows framed a dusk I'd come to know like an old friend. I walked to the bathroom, turned on the dim light, and stood in front of the mirror. For a moment I saw the version of myself that used to live here, the one who curled up on that couch with red eyes and trembling hands, the one who questioned every memory, every boundary, every word she spoke. But then I saw who I had become, not perfect, not invincible, but whole. I met my own gaze and said it out loud just once. I am finally home,